It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague, a man who wish he got paid as much per article as Kenny Golladay is getting paid per yard so far this season. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
I wouldn't take the pay cut, personally.
Yeah, for those who are unaware, it was highlighted by someone in PFF that Kenny Golladay has made $140,000 for every yard gain this season, or about $4,000 an inch. Insert your own gags here.
I already have.
That's spectacular, and that is as a friend of the show Andrew Brandt would say, getting him elected into the Business Hall of Fame.
Oh, definitely. He's going to be, he and his agent for that deal they got from the Giants, that has to be a contender for, when it comes for his, nomination. That will be the first exhibit.
It's fantastic stuff. Big week this week. Mains events. I think 4 stories. We're going to talk quarterbacks. We're going to talk the matchup of the week. We're going to talk cases. And we're going to define what primetime means, and pray for Minnesota fans that it means evenings in the US. We then got fancy darlings, fancy losers, and then Neil will get to do a lap of honour in relation to fancy predictions bound to go wrong, as they didn't go wrong for Neil last week, and we will explain all later.
Absolute worldie.
You were so happy that it was the first thing he texted me at somewhere around 9:20 on Sunday.
Yeah, as soon as that monstrosity of a game was finished.
Fantastic stuff. We'll get on to that, but let's start first of all with the main event.
Time now for the main event.
Listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of articles and watched a lot of NFL over the first 3 weeks. And it never fails to amaze me how good quarterbacks are when they're in stable coaching situations, and how bad quarterbacks are in unstable ones. The best 4 quarterbacks this season could be argued are Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Hurts. All were not seen as the best player coming out in college due to a multitude of different reasons, whether it be throwing, whether it be durability, whether it be size. But all of them have been surrounded by people to help them. An interesting concept in the NFL. And it's working. I mean, especially for, if we look at Lamar and Josh Allen especially, because they've been in the longest. We never really digged into the Lamar Jackson stuff, Neil, when he came out. But, there will be receipts by a lot of people who we trust and know and have had on this show in relation to Josh Allen, who were like, this dude ain't going to make it. And right now he's probably the best quarterback in the NFL, or second best quarterback, whatever. And it shows that obviously these guys are tremendously talented and obviously are tremendously hardworking. I mean, if we take Jalen Hurts, I remember watching him play for Alabama, and he eventually then moved to Oklahoma and then got drafted by the Eagles. And that dude was a running back. Like, he wasn't a quarterback. I think everyone's said that. And you look at the performance he put out the first 3 weeks, and he's fantastic. And it shows what dedication of those players does, but also putting them in systems and schemes which allow them to thrive.
And also putting them in systems and schemes and not consistently changing that. I mean, this is the first time since Jalen Hurts was at high school that he had the same offense 2 years running. So it wasn't a different coaching staff. It wasn't a different, offensive coordinator or head coach. The first time since he was in high school that basically he could say, okay, well, this is what we did last year. So I know I can do that. So let's build on it. And, Josh Allen has, Brian Daboll has gone, but Ken Dorsey was already on the staff. So it's pretty much the same thing. There's a few little tweaks here and there. Lamar Jackson has had pretty much Greg Roman since the year dot.
Yes.
But also it's helped the fact that John Harbaugh has been there and Harbaugh oversees everything. So it's an incredibly overlooked thing that these players have to come in, and it's not Madden. We don't just get to select a play. We get to look around and basically throw it to the open player. It doesn't work that way. Different coaches want things done a different way. If you watch or have watched any of friend of the pod JT O'Sullivan's videos, especially about specific X and O concepts, he talks about how some coaches, for the drive concept, for example, some coaches want you to go to the shallow cross first. Some people want you to look to the go route, then the shallow cross. It's the same route, it's the same principles, but different coaches want different things from you. And if you come back and say, oh, I've read it this way to that way, then some coaches might say, oh, well, it worked, and other coaches will chew your arse out. So just things like that. Continuity is a massive thing in the NFL. Why do we think, granted they didn't win as much as they should have, why were the Saints successful for so long? Because they had Breeze and Peyton. Why were the Colts successful so long? Manning, Tom Moore, Dungy. It's Brady, Belichick, someone on that staff. It was continuity is an incredible thing. A coach having confidence in you and drowning out the noise around you, a player, can obviously help as well. Tua is the prime example of that. An awful lot of people would say, they didn't want Tua to be the quarterback, maybe thinking Teddy Bridgewater would be a better fit for this offense. Well, the offense is not exactly as Kyle Shanahan runs it. Mike McDaniel has added tweaks. And one thing that I wrote about this a couple of years ago, when Will Fuller was in Miami, I said if you look at back then Tua's deep ball accuracy, and JJ Zacharyson has noticed this as well, his accuracy on deep throws was actually quite good. His rate of throwing them was below league average. So he can make the throws. He just doesn't or didn't. Well, it's incredible what putting a system with two of the fastest players in the NFL around you will do. So it's a cautionary tale that quarterbacks are allowed to develop and get better, but you have to be patient organisationally with them as well.
The opposite of this is two highlight examples at the moment is Justin Fields in Chicago and Daniel Jones in New York. I don't think we can say now, like with Daniel Jones especially, he's not a franchise quarterback and he's not very good. But the issue with that is that was he ever put in a situation to succeed? This is a franchise that brought in Jason Garrett, and when he left Dallas became the best offense in the league, and he took over the Giants, they became the worst. And okay, there's talent and whatever, but someone who actually could coach scheme would be useful. And then you look at that 1940s nonsense that the Chicago Bears are rolling out, and yeah, Justin Fields looks bad, but I think one of the reasons he looks bad is not necessarily just him, it's the situation he's been put in, which is absolutely and utterly horrific.
The problem with the Bears is, excuse me, as bad as Fields looks at times, as poor as the receiving core is, as porous as the offensive line is, especially in pass protection, they're 2-1. So why would they change? Yeah,
absolutely.
They will trick themselves into thinking the process. And Fields has got them this far. No, he hasn't. Any upright quarterback with a knowledge of, with a copy of, The Single Wing by Mouse Davis, or whatever it was, could operate this offense.
Absolutely.
From a quarterbacking point of view, he is leaving masses of plays out in the field. He is being able to salvage drives because he can run. And these aren't design runs, these are scrambles because they're still not allowing him to be a design runner. It's god-awful to watch, but they're 2-1. If they were 0-3, they might be open to making changes, but they're 2-1. So why would you?
All I'd say is, to finish this kind of discussion off, is CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, among others. I hope, for your sakes, as professional football players, you get yourselves in good situations that allow you to thrive. and not Chicago, the Giants, or Washington.
Spoiler alert, they won't.
Yeah, spoiler alert, there's a probably better than 50% chance to put in horrible situations. Let's move on to the next story, Neil. For me, the matchup of the week, people may talk the Chiefs game, people may talk the others, but let's be frank, on this show, with our history, there's only one game this week, and that is the Doug Bowl. Eagles versus Jaguars, Jalen versus Trevor. Two teams who know who they are, and two teams with their arrows pointing a way up. Now, one is obviously ahead of the other in terms of development, but I think what we can be clear, especially after last week, two absolutely dominant performances against the Washington football team and against the Los Angeles Chargers, that these two teams are not to be messed with.
And I was actually at the game the last time these two teams played. At Wembley in 2018. God, that was 4 years ago. These two teams, the matchup for people to look out for this week is the Eagles' offensive line against the Jaguars' front four. Because that front four is nasty.
Yes.
This is, I'm not saying it's back to what it was, but Saxonville, there were rumblings it could be back again. But the Eagles' offensive line is, well, we know one thing they're going to do. They're going to invest in that area. We know one thing. Other than, touch wood, Devontae Smith, we know the Eagles can't draft wide receivers, but they will invest in the offensive line. And, you got Malata, Landon Dickerson, Kelsey, Sayamalu, and Lane Johnson. They are maulers up front, which is helping this team do what it wants to do. They're not running the ball particularly well this year, other than Jalen Hurts, but the passing game has elevated. It helps adding players like A.J. Brown. Jacksonville's offense is being run by a grown-up who is trying to play to the strengths of his talented quarterback. It's a foreign concept for many, but it does seem to be working. There's still growing pains. It's not perfect, but Trevor Lawrence is still, as good as they've been, he's still throwing to Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. He would kill for the weapons that Jalen Hurts has got. But, as you say, this is a team between two teams who know what they're about because they have good, solid coaching staffs. That helps. They don't, I don't think there obviously is. I don't think these two teams are being driven by the ego of their head coaches.
No. I think what's interesting is just, the end of the Doug Peterson era in Philadelphia was messy, right? I think we all know that. If you read that article, I think it was in The Athletic, about that kind of period of time, it didn't end very well. But what we should also say is, this man was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles when the Philadelphia Eagles last won the Super Bowl. And when I say last won the Super Bowl, I mean the only time they won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, okay, it didn't go very well at the end, but this is a talented head coach. And it's an easy narrative to say, oh, look, an adult turns into Jacksonville and they become good after getting rid of that clown, Urban Meyer. But that's literally what's happened. Christian Kirk is a serviceable wide receiver who got paid too much money. Fine. But it isn't the greatest wide receiving room in the world, right? Do you know what I mean? It's okay, but it's not spectacular. And they're moving up and down the field with regularity on many plays because of scheme, because of a really talented quarterback who we're getting the best of, because of good coaching. We joked on the Philadelphia side all year, at the start of the season, is this the year where we find out whether Jalen Hurts gets paid $400 million or we use 2 first-round draft picks to get a quarterback? Right now, it's a back up the Brinks truck time, because that man be getting paid, and those first-round draft picks can go on, I don't know, replacements for Brandon Graham or someone on the defensive line. That kind of move which makes that team even better with the young stars they've already got around them. You know, I'm glad to see that people are joining my train in terms of looking at the Eagles in terms of talent, looking at the Eagles in terms of one of the most horrific schedules ever created, and going, oh my God, this team could win 14 games, and we don't even know if they're any good. But guess what? They are actually good, because there's a chance they're going to batter a lot of these teams. If you look at the schedule they've got, weirdly, just kind of twist of fate, this could be one of the hardest games they've got left on the schedule, which is crazy to think about when at week before the start of the season we were saying this is one of the easiest ones.
I think the one thing that the storyline that some people are harping on is if Doug Peterson doesn't get a good reception, then Eagles fans are scum. Booing Santa is one thing. Booing the coach who A, brought the Super Bowl to the city, and B, there's a frigging statue of.
I was going to say
the stadium.
The statue suggests that he will probably get a good reception, right? The only slight issue related to that is in a weird situation that he's 35-10 up, and I don't think this will happen. And he goes for 2. Do you know what I mean? Then he might get booed, but I don't see that as a situation that's going to occur.
No. Doug will get a good reception. It'll be a good game. I don't think it'll be. I mean, to be honest, the one at Wembley was a good game. It was a very close game against two flawed sides who've both been in the Final Four the season before. Obviously, things have happened since then, but it's going to be a good game. It's certainly one worth watching. And I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Okay, let's move on. I did something stupid at the start of the season, which at the time we knew was stupid. And what we didn't know was how quickly would we find out that it was stupid. The stupid thing I did was believe that the curse that is surrounding the Chargers franchise, regardless of whether they're in LA or San Diego, had disappeared, and that would mean that they would be fine and they would make the Super Bowl this season. I'm going to highlight some names now in terms of players who play for the Chargers, and when I say player, I use inverted commas.
They're paid by the Chargers.
They are paid by the Chargers. Jalen Guyton, torn ACL. Keenan Allen, hamstring, missed the last 2 games, questionable for week 4. Joey Bosa, now in surgery, doubtful to return for the rest of the season. Corey Linsley, centre, knee injury, questionable for week 4. Donald Palmer Jr., hamstring, questionable. Rashawn Slater, torn bicep, out for the year. JC Jackson, ankle, paid a lot of money, not played a game yet, questionable for week 4. Oh, and by the way, the franchise and the man with probably the best hair in the NFL, his ribs are in Lego pieces and being put together with sticky tape. Now, it would be easy to suggest that the Los Angeles Chargers are cursed because they left San Diego. That's why I balls that up. But they were cursed when they were in San Diego. So my question becomes, how the balls do we stop this curse?
We need Gandalf to return from his battle with the Balrog on his way down to the deep parts of the earth. There's just no... I don't know what humanly can be done. This team has, at least 4 times in the last 15 years, had, at the start and for large parts of the season, the most talented roster in the NFL. And then Charger things happen to it. I honestly don't know.
If you asked someone, Neil, like an NFL person, not even a fantasy person, like let's say they'd say, can you name the best 5 players on the LA Chargers? I believe they would say Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater, Corey Linsley, Joey Bosa, and Keenan Allen. And all them are injured and may not play more than 5 games this whole season. It's insanity. That, like, it's every team has to deal with injuries. Yes, I understand that. But Can we not start at the top of the roster and work down? How about work from the bottom up?
Yeah. The most important positions in the modern NFL are your quarterback, your left tackle, pass rusher, and a cornerback. And their best players at all those positions are either hurt or out. So, yeah, every team does have to deal with injuries, but come on. So one team dealing with, a long snapper who's hurt his toe, and one team that, they're going to be paying their quarterback, $250 million probably, and he's got no ribs. And the person who's being tasked to protect his blind side is the least feared storm in the entire state, the entire state of California.
What I would say is, before we quickly move on this, I just want to take a quick aside, and I know Neil made a slight jab at the head coach of the LA Chargers previously. What did you call him, Neil?
Fake sharp.
If you may not believe in curses, Mr. Staley, and that's fine, but they exist and they're real, and you need to accept that. And if I see again your team getting blown out by any team and your injured quarterback still playing, I myself, not a Los Angeles Chargers fan, will fly to Los Angeles and deal with you personally.
One thing I would suggest is, A, this is Justin Herbert as your quarterback, not 2019 Drew Brees. You do not need to run a dink and dunk offense with Justin Herbert. The man has a howitzer. So when the game is finished against the Houston Texans, do not let Brandon Cooks leave with the Texans. Keep him in the stadium with you. Get some goddamn speed on that offense. And if it means telling Joe Lombardi to go forth and multiply, do it.
Yeah, they are slow. Final thing, Neil. In your opinion, what defines Primetime, and what does this mean for this week's London game?
Primetime is not a standalone game in the first thing in the American morning, so I think Kurt might be okay.
36 of 56 for 458 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception in a tie. Jameis Winston, also been to the UK before. 30 of 54 for 400 yards, 1 touchdown and 5 interceptions. If that is anything to go by, that is 110 passes by those two quarterbacks combined. There could be a lot of throwing in this game. I hope it's good, because there's a lot of people who pay a lot of money to watch these games, and I completely understand why. And to get teams of the stature of the Vikings and the Saints is excellent. What we always seem to find is we always get here and at least one of these teams suck. And this year it's the Saints. And I was like, I don't know what to expect from the Saints, and I've said that from the start of the season. I'm kind of believing what I'm going to accept from the Saints, and that they're not very good.
Can I just say, though, the game you talk about, Kirk Cousins threw all those yards that ends in a tie. Who was the quarterback for the other team?
It was Andy Dalton, right?
Andy Dalton is the backup quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, and Jameis Winston is likely to play, but not definite. So these two could meet again in different uniforms on our shores.
That is insanity. That is insanity, and I pray for the people in Tottenham. We're in Tottenham for this one, that they get to see a competitive game. And what I would like is, do you remember those halcyon days when we thought Justin Jefferson was going to break all records for receivers? That was cool. Why have they stopped throwing to him?
Good laugh.
Yeah, I'm not laughing. On that note, Neil, let's move on to the fantasy stuff on this show. Main event's over, and let's get on with your fancy darlings.
Hello, darling.
Last week, bad week. Neil was 0-2. Overall, now 2-4. 2 picks last week. You picked Jared Goff. Jared got 14.9 points. He was only quarterback 18. Big loss. Neil dipped his toe into the tight end sphere. Went for Evan Ingram. 2.9 points. Tight end 26. Again, that means there's 25 other tight ends with more points, and he got a loss.
2.9 centimetres away from the tight end 10 on the week if he could get his damn feet down.
Yeah, fair. Neil,
But what is it you always say? Close only
counting horseshoes and hand grenades. Neil, Gorilla Monsoon taught us this in 80s and 90s wrestling. You should know this by now.
He did.
Neil, who are your darlings this week?
My first darling, I'm going back to the Detroit well. DeAndre Swift is hurt. I believe he will not play. He may not play again for a few weeks, which means Jamal Williams is an auto start this week. He has 43 rush attempts on this still young season, and 4 of them have resulted in touchdowns. His role was defined anyway. DeAndre Swift ran for 50 yards, falls down inside the 10, he goes off, Jamal comes in. Even in situations where they've had timeouts, and it could be, okay, we could give DeAndre a blow and then put him out with. No, Jamal Williams comes out when the ball is by the goal line. So we know he's going to get the goal line work, and now he's going to get most of the early down work anyway. The Seahawks have allowed the second most rushing yards to running backs this season, 385. They've allowed 18 receptions, which is tied for 6th, and are giving up 25.4 fantasy points per game to running backs. So if you have Jamal Williams on your bench, make the correction and get him in the lineup.
God, Seattle are awful. Neil, who's your second fantasy darling?
Second fantasy darling is a unit. It is the defense and special teams of the New York Football Giants. They are playing the Chicago Bears. As we've seen, Justin Fields is not throwing the ball, but when he does, a fair amount of his throws go to the opposition. He's taken the most sacks in the NFL with the highest sack rate. He also has one of the lowest completion percentages above over expectation of all starting quarterbacks. They're probably, this game's not going to be one for the purist, I assure you, but the Bears are playing in it, so that pretty much narrows that down, doesn't it? So, as defensive streaming options go, the Giants are as good as most teams this week, so if you're desperate, by all means, fire them up.
Jamal Williams, Giants defense and special teams. Let's find out who Neil's fancy loser is. Another loss last week. Neil now 1-2 on the season. Went for Saquon Barkley. That run kind of put paid to it. If you haven't seen, it's a fantastic run by Saquon Barkley for a touchdown. At 18.6 points, he was running back 5 on the week, so that's a loss. Neil, who's going to stink this week?
As much as I hate to say it, George Kittle. He is back. He's playing, which is obviously an advantage. Doesn't look fluid, doesn't look his normal self, and plus the San Francisco 49ers have, I believe, lost Trent Williams, so that's their last competent offensive lineman who's going to be hurt. It's backups all along the line, and if you're going up against Aaron Donald, you don't really want backups all along your line. So I think Kittle will play a large number of snaps, but he will be blocking for a lot of them, so that just going to bring his floor down because he's not going to get the opportunities. So I hate to say it, but I would look at streaming options before Kittle this week.
The San Francisco 49ers have gone from interesting to not for me in like so fast. It's unbelievable. But yeah, we move on. Let's find out what the fancy predictions bound to go wrong are. Last week, I believed that Jamar Chase would get 150 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the Jets. He didn't. He got 29 yards and 1 touchdown. He was wide receiver 41. Get in the bin, Cincinnati. Absolutely get yourselves in the bin. I know you won, but just for goodness sake, behave yourselves. And I think that 29 yards and a touchdown was just the one reception. Like, what are we even playing at here? Neil, on the other hand, said to everyone that the Texans' defense and special teams would get more points than Justin Fields. Just for everyone's clarity, The Texans got 9 points. Justin Fields got 6.94. He was quarterback 31 out of 34 who were eligible. This kid had a team that was, I'm just going to name some names now: Trey Sermon, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jameson Williams. Just, what are we doing? And now he's with like me, you, and Barney McGrew. Like, it's absolutely horrific. But that is a win. So we were 1-1 on the week and 1-5 overall. Go Neil. In terms of fancy predictions this week, I'll go first. This season, the top scoring defense and special teams have been the Steelers in week 1 and the Bucks in week 2, I think, when they played New Orleans. They both had 26 points. A defense and special teams is going to score 30 points this week. That defense and special teams is the Dallas Cowboys. They play Carson Wentz and the Washington Commanders, who are wearing what can only be described by the kids as a lit uniform, but could also be described as what you'd wear to a funeral, which could be Carson Wentz's if he holds onto the ball as long as he did against Philadelphia, when Micah Parsons sacks him for possibly the 15th time in the same game. While he's not doing that, he may throw 3 interceptions to Trayvon Diggs. Dallas Cowboys will become the highest point-scoring defense of the season so far in their massacre of the Washington Commanders. Neil, what's your pick?
My prediction, I'm not going to go into as much depth as that, but in a game between two of the fastest-paced offenses in the NFL so far this season, I believe Mitchell Trubisky will find his mojo and be able to finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week with, 2 passing touchdowns and at least 60 rushing yards on for himself.
The Pittsburgh Steelers really need this, and I'm going to explain why. Because the Pittsburgh Steelers need to not be in a situation where they have to play Kenny Pickett in the next couple of weeks, because the issue becomes that after this week where they play the Jets, they then play at Buffalo, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, at the Dolphins, at the Eagles. Like, Kenny Pickett might die in those games if he plays. So they probably need Trubisky to, at least be okay. Because, it saves Kenny Pickett from dying when his first 2 games are Buffalo and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, picking someone, with your first round pick and him being, ripped to pieces by the Wolves in the first month of his NFL playing career, it's that the kids are saying it's far from ideal.
The kids would be right. Neil, that is it for this week. Before we're back next week, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter at Ndutton13. Read my stuff at 4for4 Football, at Numberfire, Rotoviz, and Player Profiler.
I'm at Mainsy7. Combine me at waxing_lyrical. I did the touchdown review on Tuesday. Came out Wednesday morning. Great stuff as always. We all wax lyrical. I can say that because it's my show. About Lamar and why he's the MVP. We also had George Somerville on to talk SEC to tell us why both of us who are kiffing curious think that Ole Miss versus Kentucky is the best game in the college football slate this week, not Bama versus Arkansas. And also, George told us where Tim Tebow keeps his Heisman trophies year in, year out. That's it for the show. Enjoy it. Don't forget to tweet Neil when Doug's putting a show on in Philadelphia, especially if you hear someone booing. Until then, until next week, these top guys are out.